The Old West was more than dusty towns and cowboy legends. It was a battleground between law and chaos, where outlaws became household names and gunfire settled more than words ever could. These 10 figures didn't just break the law. They carved their names into history through blood, grit, and the kind of audacity only the frontier could breed. From Billy the Kid to Jesse James, these were the outlaws the West never forgot. Number 1. Billy the Kid. In the dusty territory of New Mexico in the late 1870s, Henry McCarty, who would become known as Billy the Kid, carved a brief but blazing trail through the law and order frontier. Born in New York City in 1859, he lost his father early, moved across the plains as a teenager, and by age 15 was already orphaned when his mother died from tuberculosis. He learned fast that the frontier had 2 codes, one for lawmen, one for rustlers. By age 16, he had been jailed for stealing food and escaping almost immediately. Billy's involvement in the notorious Lincoln County War turned him from small-time rustler into headline outlaw. He joined the Regulators, a posse of young guns and cowboys, fighting in a feud between ranching magnates and local law enforcement. During this war, he was implicated in multiple killings, including the murder of Sheriff William Brady in April 1878. Despite being just in his late teens, Billy developed a reputation for being fast with a gun and quick to vanish into the barren hills. He reportedly killed his first man during an argument at a saloon in Arizona in August 1877. By December 1880, his face and name were known far beyond New Mexico, thanks to newspapers and dime novels eager to latch onto the myth. The fact is, though, that recent historical research shows even the story of his capture and death is tangled. Researchers found that Pat Garrett may have exaggerated his role in catching Billy. On the night of July 14th, 1881, Billy the Kid was shot dead at age 21 in Fort Sumner, New Mexico. In his lifetime, he became one of the most famous figures of the Old West, not because he reformed the frontier, but because he embodied what the frontier feared and celebrated: youth, violence, freedom, and disaster all rolled into one. Number 2. Jesse James. In post-Civil War Missouri, the figure of Jesse Woodson James emerged not simply as an outlaw, but as a symbol of lingering conflict. Born on September 5th, 1847 near Kearney, Missouri, he grew up amid the fierce guerrilla warfare of the border states. After the war, he and his older brother Frank joined a band of former Confederate fighters and turned their experience into a crime spree. They formed the notorious James Younger Gang, which carried out bank and train robberies across the Midwest. Jesse James's rise in the crime world came with both calculated violence and carefully crafted myth-making. He wrote letters to newspapers, claiming, "We are not thieves, we are bold robbers," positioning himself as more than a brute. Over time, the public image of James as a Robin Hood-type outlaw grew, though historical records show no evidence he shared loot with the poor. One dramatic turning point was the bank robbery in Northfield, Minnesota in 1876, which went disastrously wrong. The James Younger Gang was nearly wiped out, marking the beginning of their downfall. In April 1882, Jesse James met his end at 34 when Robert Ford shot him in the back in St. Joseph, Missouri, under circumstances that blended betrayal, politics, and reward. His death sparked national headlines and sealed his place in American folklore. Today, his name lives on in dime novels, films, and memorials. But the real story is more messy. A war-scarred youth turned outlaw, leveraging old loyalties and new violence, and shaping the legend as much as it shaped the man. Number 3. Butch Cassidy. Reporters of the day called him a thinking outlaw. Born Robert Leroy Parker in Beaver, Utah in 1866, he adopted the name Butch Cassidy after riding with an older rustler named Mike Cassidy. He served time in Wyoming in the mid-1890s, then stepped back into the open country with a tighter crew and a bigger plan. The plan was simple: hit banks and trains fast, swap to fresh horses, disappear into the red rock strongholds. His wild bunch tested that plan on August 13th, 1896, with a bank job in Montpelier, Idaho. It worked. More robberies followed across several territories, while the gang used the remote hole-in-the-wall country as a rotating hideout. The hideout sat beyond easy reach of posses and gave the crew days of head start on any chase. The pressure spiked after dawn on June 2, 1899. The gang halted Union Pacific's overland flyer near Wilcox, Wyoming. They used dynamite to blast the express car and fled with thousands of dollars. Railroads funded massive posses. Bloodhounds and mounted deputies scoured Wyoming for weeks, but the robbers slipped away into the breaks. A single photograph then turned the hunt national. In 1900, the Fort Worth 5 portrait, shot by John Swartz, showed Cassidy seated beside Sundance Kid and 3 partners. Pinkertons copied the image to wanted posters and circulated it across the West. Visibility killed anonymity. Every depot clerk now knew their faces. Railroad tycoon Harriman took the pursuit personally. He backed a fast response posse that used special trains to rush detectives and fresh horses to hold up sights. The old rhythm of strike and vanish started breaking down under that pressure. Cassidy briefly tried a legal exit. In 1899, he offered to surrender his guns in return for a pardon from Utah's governor. The effort stalled, and the guns were handed to a sheriff as proof of intent. The amnesty never came. By 1901, Cassidy and Sundance sailed east, then slipped to Argentina. They ran a sheep ranch in Chubut province from 1902 to 1906, went back to robbing, and later turned up in Bolivia. Reports say they died in a shootout near San Vicente in 1908. Forensic digs later complicated that story when DNA from a supposed Cassidy grave did not match family samples. Number 4. The Sundance Kid. In the waning years of the Old West, one name stood out for both speed and mystery: Harry Alonzo Longabaugh, better known as the Sundance Kid. He was born around 1867 in Montclair, Pennsylvania, and by his mid-teens had headed west in search of a life beyond the grind. He earned the nickname after a brief stint in jail for horse and saddle theft near Sundance, Wyoming. That 18-month sentence marked the turn when he adopted Sundance Kid as his alias and stepped fully into outlaw territory. As a key member of the infamous Wild Bunch gang, alongside Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid became part of one of the longest stalking crime sprees in the West. The gang specialized in daring train and bank robberies across Wyoming, Montana, and later South America. What set him apart? He was reputed to be among the fastest draws in his circle, yet historians debate how many actual murders he carried out. Some claims say very few or none until the final chapter. In 1901, the pressure of the posse and Pinkerton detectives pushed Sundance, Cassidy, and Sundance's companion Etta Place to flee the United States for Argentina and then Bolivia. There the trail grows foggy. The prevailing story: on November 6th or 7th, 1908, near San Vicente in Bolivia, the two were cornered by a military detachment. Gunfire erupted. Bodies were found. Forensic DNA tests decades later failed to conclusively identify them. The Sundance Kid's legacy lives on in Western lore, not just as a ruthless outlaw, but as a flight to freedom icon. His life reminds us that for some, the frontier wasn't just land to conquer. It was escape, gamble, and myth all rolled into one. Number 5. Belle Starr. Reporters in the 1880s called her the Bandit Queen. Records name her Myra Maybelle Shirley, born near Carthage, Missouri on February 5, 1848. She grew up educated enough to play piano at the Carthage Female Academy. Then the Civil War wrecked the family's plans and pushed them south to Texas. She married James C. Reed in 1866. He drifted into crime and was killed by a law officer at Paris, Texas in 1874. That loss tied Belle even closer to outlaw networks moving through Indian Territory. In 1880, she married Sam Starr of a Cherokee clan already watched by federal deputies. Together, they ran a refuge for rustlers and bootleggers along the Canadian River. It was a strategic spot known as Younger's Bend. From there, riders could vanish into timber and creek bottoms faster than a posse could form. Federal jurisdiction reached them in 1882. Belle and Sam were arrested on horse theft charges and hauled to Fort Smith. The case landed before Judge Isaac C. Parker, the frontier's hanging judge. Belle was convicted in 1883 and served 9 months at the Detroit House of Corrections, where even prison reports called her a model inmate. Sam received hard labor. The partnership ended on December 17, 1886, when Sam Starr and law officer Frank West killed each other in a gunfight. Belle returned to Younger's Bend and kept orbiting the same rough crowd. Rumors linked her to men with names like Blue Duck and Jack Spaniard. Some of it was real. Some of it was dime novel embroidery that sold papers from St. Louis to New York. On February 3, 1889, while riding home from a neighbor's house, Belle Starr was ambushed and shot to death 2 days before her 41st birthday. Accounts split on the killer. One version points to a drunken tenant named Edgar Watson. Another says no one saw the attack and the case remains officially unsolved. That uncertainty fueled a legend that still outshines the documented crimes behind it. Number 6. Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Barry Stapp Earp emerges on the record in 1881 as tensions explode in Cochise County. A stagecoach is robbed on March 15th and 2 people are killed. The Earps help capture a suspect who later escapes from jail. The failure deepens their rift with County Sheriff Johnny Bayan. By summer, Wyatt is working angles to stop the killers. Under oath, he later says he offered Ike Clanton access to Wells Fargo reward money if Ike would turn in the robbers. He admits the arrest would also help his run for county sheriff. The politics behind the badge are now in the open. The feud peaks on October 26, 1881 in Tombstone. The gunfight near the OK Corral lasts about half a minute. 3 cowboys die. Virgil Earp is the town's chief law officer and leads the arrest effort. Wyatt's name becomes the headline, but the legal record shows Virgil's command role. A judge reviews the shooting in a lengthy hearing and refuses to send the Earps and Doc Holliday to trial for murder. The ruling states the defendants were justified under the circumstances. The decision does not end the violence. Retaliation leaves Morgan Earp dead and Virgil maimed. Wyatt responds with warrants and a hard ride after the suspects. Historians call it the Vendetta Ride. The posse targets men linked to the ambushes and then leaves Arizona Territory under pressure of new indictments. Earp's life after Tombstone shows a restless pattern. He prospects in boomtowns. He gambles. He even referees the 1896 heavyweight bout between Tom Sharkey and Bob Fitzsimmons in San Francisco. He disqualifies Fitzsimmons and triggers a national scandal that follows him for years. In old age, he gravitates to Hollywood sets and tells stories to screenwriters who turn frontier memories into movies. He dies quietly in Los Angeles on January 13, 1929 at 80. Nearly 50 years have passed since Tombstone, but the legend is still growing when he is laid to rest. Number 7. Doc Holliday. John Henry Doc Holliday entered the record as a trained dentist from Georgia, who shifted west after illness and the collapse of his dental practice. He was born in 1851 in Spalding County and educated in the South before heading toward Texas and New Mexico, where gambling paid better than fillings. This move placed him on the same trails as drifting cowboys and professional gunmen. The partnership that defined his fame began in Texas. In 1878, Wyatt Earp tracked an outlaw to Fort Griffin and was told to ask a skilled gambler named Holliday for help. Accounts say Holliday passed along key information and later showed up in Dodge City, where the two men cemented a working friendship that would echo through Tombstone. Before Arizona, Holliday spent volatile years in frontier towns. He faced gaming arrests in Dallas and moved restlessly between saloons and card rooms from New Mexico to Colorado. The pattern is consistent in newspapers and court notes. He looked for dry air and steady tables. Trouble found him anyway. By late 1880, he joined the Earps in Arizona Territory. Hearings and affidavits place him in the political storm that led to the OK Corral fight and the long courtroom review that followed. After the ambushes on the Earp family, Holliday rode during the vendetta phase and later split from Wyatt as the pressure of indictments and interstate warrants mounted. The most detailed look at his post-Tombstone years comes from Colorado. In Leadville in 1884, he shot William Billy Allen after a debt dispute. Surviving testimony describes Holliday staging a confrontation inside Hyman's saloon and firing twice. Allen lived. A jury acquitted Holliday in March 1885 on self-defense grounds after a closely watched trial. Declining health shaped the closing chapter. Holliday sought relief in high country resorts and mineral springs, but tuberculosis worsened. Georgia State Encyclopedia and Western Histories agree on the endpoint in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, in November 1887. The medical fight he could not win finally ended far from the Arizona headlines that made his name. His reputation today rests on documented court records, territorial reports, and a tangle of legend that grew around a gambler who kept finding the center of the storm. Number 8. Black Bart. California Stage Lines reported a new kind of highwayman in 1875. He worked alone. He spoke politely. He signed 2 rhymed notes, Black Bart the P.O.8. Investigators later named him as Charles E. Bowles, an English-born Civil War veteran who drifted west and turned to robbing Wells Fargo stagecoaches on mountain roads where drivers had to slow down. His first confirmed holdup hit a Copperopolis route on July 26, 1875. Over the next 8 years, he struck again and again across Northern California and into Southern Oregon. Company records and later state summaries credit him with at least 28 robberies between 1877 and 1883. He favored remote grades and timed stops to minutes. Witnesses said he kept the shotgun steady and the orders brief. The poems were rare but unforgettable. One was found in an emptied express box in 1877. Another appeared the next year. Both mocked the company and helped build the Gentleman Bandit brand that newspapers ran with for years. Wells Fargo's chief detective James B. Hume finally got a break after a holdup near Sonoma County in 1883. The bandit dropped a handkerchief. A small laundry mark on the cloth was traced through San Francisco's washhouses to a customer living under the name C. E. Bolton. Officers arrested Bowles on November 12, 1883, and secured a confession to the most recent job. Court records show he pleaded guilty and entered San Quentin at age 48 to serve 6 years. Prison files describe him as disciplined and cooperative. He paroled in January 1888 after a little over 4 years and walked out a free man. Contemporary accounts also stress what he did not do. No passenger was shot during his crimes. Later interviews claimed his shotgun was never even loaded. He relied on surprise, terrain, and the fear of that first command to stop. After release, he vanished from public view, leaving the legend to outrun the man who started it. Number 9. Sam Bass. Reports from Texas put Sam Bass on the map first as a horseman. Denton County records recall a young farmhand who trained and raced a local champion known as the Denton Mare. Crowds knew his name long before any posse did. He tried straight work. He freighted goods. He trailed cattle north. Then he drifted to the Black Hills with partners and learned the hard math of boomtown gambling. Histories note that early raids grew out of that circle. Some researchers say trail boss Joel Collins initially called the shots in the group, later tagged the Black Hills Bandits. That debate shows how fast shifting crews could blur who really led whom on the frontier. Bass returned to Texas with notoriety building. Folk memory in Denton links him to a tight local network that favored fast horses and quiet supply stops. Those logistics mattered more than bravado. Outlaws who could swap mounts and vanish down creek bottoms often beat the telegraph and bought hours of freedom. By midsummer 1878, the chase moved to Williamson County. City files in Round Rock describe how Bass, Frank Jackson, Seaborn Barnes, and Jim Murphy rode in on a Sunday night. They cased the town on Monday. They argued timing. Murphy urged delay. The plan fixed on a mid-afternoon strike later in the week. The leak came from inside the camp. Britannica's summary confirms that Murphy tipped rangers to the target and timeline. Lawmen set a watch near the bank and the livery. When the gang approached, gunfire broke the street calm. Deputy A.W. Grimes fell in the first exchange. Local histories place his death on July 19, 1878. Bass broke away wounded. He was found outside town and brought back under guard. He died 2 days later on his 27th birthday. The aftermath spilled into culture fast. A ballad named him outright. Round Rock still stages reenactments that keep the story public, turning a short outlaw career into a long civic memory. Number 10. John Wesley Hardin. Texas newspapers labeled him the deadliest gunman of his era. Records place his birth on May 26, 1853 in Bonham, Texas, to a Methodist preacher's family. Early run-ins turned violent, and by his teens, he was on the move across Reconstruction-era Texas, where gunfights were often settled without courts. A pattern formed. Disputes escalated. Posses gathered. Hardin slipped away. Texas State Historical Association summaries show a rising count of shootings across multiple counties and into Kansas during 1871 and 1872. These reports draw from period newspapers and court dockets rather than legend. The turning point came after he killed Deputy Sheriff Charles Webb in Comanche in 1874. Texas Rangers tracked him across the South. Ranger John B. Armstrong grabbed him on a train in Florida in 1877. Hardin was hauled back to Texas to face trial. Court proceedings in Comanche produced a conviction. He received 25 years in the state penitentiary at Huntsville in 1878. Prison files and later histories agree that he adapted to the routine. He studied law. He wrote, "On February 17, 1894, he walked out of prison with time off for good behavior. Within weeks, a judge certified him fit to practice law." A formal pardon soon followed, and he reunited with his children in Gonzales. The contrast between the reputation and the credential made headlines. In 1895, he moved to El Paso to open a law office and to appear for the defense in a local murder case. Personal choices complicated his new start. He took up with the wife of an absent client named Martin Moroz and clashed with local officers over her arrests. Tension in the saloons rose week by week. The end came on the night of August 19, 1895, at the Acme Saloon. Constable John Selman Sr. approached from behind and fired. Witnesses said Hardin collapsed at the dice table. Selman faced a trial that ended in a hung jury and was himself killed the next year. Hardin was buried in Concordia Cemetery. His story did not stop at the grave. A year later, his autobiography was published from his original manuscript. It fueled the enduring argument over how many men he truly killed and how much of the legend he wrote himself.